you've pretty much gone viral with, let's see, whatever podcast, now Piers Morgan. For my viewers, other than absolutely tearing the crap out of feminists and these Only Fools content workers on the whatever podcast, where does everybody else know you from? Because you're getting, you're being on Piers Morgan. You're kind of blowing up a little bit, which is quite awesome, to be frank, to see somebody in the kind of men's realm blowing up so big. What else, or how did you get there, or where did everybody kind of recognize you from?
Well, first of all, I messed up here somehow.
Okay.
And I'm streaming to the wrong stream. So give me a second.
Sure.
Let me try to un-F this, as it were. 1 second.
Sure, man.
Yeah.
No one said
my producer happened to be on the road when I called him, and I usually blame him for everything. And I'm quite happy to do that, right? I'm just really happy to blame the guy for basically anything that
well, I do the same
goes
thing
wrong, but yeah, but he's not here to blame, so unfortunately I have to take the L on this one.
Well, I do the same thing, and I am the producer. That's the problem, is I have to blame myself for absolutely everything.
Okay, they can see me fine now. All right, I think we got my my reputation worked out here.
Two monkeys with keyboards, man. Let me tell you.
That's right.
As I'm sure you guys have noticed, I've recently been talking more about testosterone and masculinity. Well, today's men suffer from the silent epidemic: testosterone decline and deficiency. Men experience a 1 to 2% loss of testosterone each year after the age of 30. And over the last 2 decades, there's been a 50% drop in testosterone levels in men due to factors like stress, poor diet, excessive alcohol consumption, and microplastics in our foods. 30% of men over the age of 40 have shown a drastic decrease in testosterone levels, resulting in lower libido and decreased energy levels. Decreasing testosterone levels leads to fatigue, stress, brain fog, libido, and bedroom performance issues, poor muscle growth, and low motivation. But there is hope. Peak Choose is designed to enhance your libido and your sex drive, increases energy and vitality. It's good for longevity, anti-aging, and it even helps with weight loss. No more man boobs or love handles. It's even known to enhance cognitive performance and reduces brain fog and reduces stress and anxiety in men. So do yourself a favor and check out Peak Choose. Use my link, peakchoose.com/pages/bachelor, and use code BACHELOR15 to get up to 15% off. Links are down below as always, and thank you for supporting sponsors that support me. And now back to our regularly scheduled program.
That's right. All right, go ahead, dude. Sorry.
Yeah,
we'll start over.
I'll introduce you to my guys, because you've got your YouTube channel, but you're right now you've gone big on, like, there's so many clips I'm seeing online right now of you on whatever podcast calling out feminists and Only Fools workers, and then you go on Piers Morgan last week and blast the hell out of basically everybody. And I did a video on it, actually, and I
watched it.
Well,
I watched the video. I liked it.
I appreciate that, man. I'm a little flabbergasted at how quickly you've run into the mainstream, and this is awesome. Like the fact that Pierce invited you on and got you on instead of the usual talking mouths, blabbing heads. Tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are now, how you joined whatever. And I'm sure your guys have heard it, so you don't have to go into too deep a detail, but just for my viewers, so they kind of know where, how,
they may
when.
They may not actually know. So maybe this would be a good recap. So most of the time when people are doing content streaming, they stick with a particular field or venue that they're very comfortable with, and that's where they stay. And they kind of, all their content, all of their commentary revolves around that specific field. I'm not that way. I debate a multitude of issues across the entirety of the globe with people from everywhere, from all walks of life. It specifically in regards to politics. So what that did was it put me in a unique position to debate. I've debated with the anti-religious on massive venues and gone viral there, right? And interestingly enough, that entire crowd mostly is completely unaware of the debates that I have inside of the Manosphere. The Manosphere is completely unaware of the debates that I often have, which go viral on other platforms where we're more mainstream. So the way I guess I've been able to get viral and out there so quickly is because my content's not regulated to to one specific piece of interest, but rather it's an entire sealed worldview which goes up against other worldviews consistently across the board. And regardless of the worldview, be it libertarian, be it anti-Christian, be it all sorts of different things, I'm usually right there to do battle with those people. So because of that, yeah, I've gotten a significant amount of reach from various platforms because I'm a well, at least apparently, I guess I'm a skilled debater. So
you're a master debater.
Master debater. Yeah, I've heard that one a few times.
Well, you've grabbed a lot of attention, at least in kind of the men's issues stuff, not only with the Whatever podcast, but where you went online with Piers Morgan and all that stuff. And I specifically, I'll tell you what, this adolescence TV show, the UK government, for their part, our media, at least our government's getting a little bit of a reprieve and a pullback. But what drove me nuts about that interview, and I don't want to talk just exclusively about it, but it's kind of the headline that kicks off this conversation, that everything nowadays is framed from the feminist viewpoint, or the feminine. From
the feminine, yeah.
And that the moment that we try to push back and say, yes, but we're living in a world of your framing, and men, that doesn't work for men. This is you're not seeing things from our eyes. And you and Tommy went at it, and I noticed they make this link constantly between men incel, men misogyny, men Andrew Tate, men. They try to tie all these terms together to where anytime you're having a conversation about one, it's like all roads lead to cigarettes. You know what I mean? All roads lead to the Austrian with a little mustache. Now all roads lead to Andrew Tate. And anytime you try to talk about anything, they use him as the
boogeyman.
Yeah,
the proverbial boogeyman. Yeah.
So
yeah, well, the thing is like I don't even always disagree with things that Tate says. To be perfectly honest, I think that there's a lot of valuable things that the guy has to say, and I think that there's a lot of things that he says that I have some kind of stark disagreements with. But you are correct that what has happened is there's an effigy, but this happens inside of the what you would call red pill or manosphere constantly. There's a new effigy which is put up, and this effigy is supposedly the representation of this entire sphere, even though, as you know, what the entirety of the manosphere is a loose confederation of various streamers, commentators, and political men's activists, not really sourced as a single leadership top-down organization as the media would have you believe, that there's some sort of incel leader who's giving marching orders from his basement telephone and cell phone to the rest of the incel terrorists globally so that they may make women's lives miserable. So it's actually much easier to take a mainstream figure like Tate, create that as an effigy, attack the effigy, and therefore anybody who has similar views. This is the same thing the left does. You brought up the mustache man, right? This is the same point I think you're making. How many times have leftists called right-wingers right? They call them that constantly. Well, you have the same view that Germans had, therefore you are this thing. It's the same type of thing. I think it's completely ludicrous, but it is a tactic which tends to work on the mainstream media side, or at least it did before alternative media.
Well, I think it's a very charged language and charged word, and when you think about it, if you look at fascism at its root kind of beliefs, and you look at National Socialism, which is what that beautiful little word stands for, both are leftist ideology. And so they had to wrangle the language and the ideology, at least in my opinion, to move it back around to the right. Because most of the right is saying, family, small government, at least now they're saying, family, small government, bring it back to the home, bring it back to either a religion or a religious base, bring it back to ground zero. And now the left is the ones that are, at some points pro big business, like pharma, during that portion of it, and then they're anti big business. So it all roots down to power. If it dude, hush. Sorry, my dog decided to.
No worries.
That if it's business that promotes the left, big business is good. If it's business that promotes the right, Same thing with
Big business bad,
millionaires.
yeah.
Same thing with the millionaires. Same thing with government policy. Same thing with how does this start? I mean, it's already starting to break down, but where do we? How do we ever reconcile this at this point?
With NGOs, the same way that they essentially attack us. We use non-government organizations in order to basically mount a counteroffensive. So if you really want to know the truth, like take organizations like the Daily Wire, right? Why aren't they an NGO? Aren't they kind of a non-government organization which has political influence over the government, is pushing their kind of various ideologies, right?
Yeah.
In a way, I would say that they're an NGO, but I don't think they fit the kind of the classic think tank of that. But alternative media itself is going to become these non-government organizational groups with political influence. They're going to begin the kind of counteroffensive, and already have been for the last 6 years, 7 years, something like this. But now the mainstream media is just on its dying death throes. Like the amount of money these people are losing because, one, the lack of entertainment, B, the production value of guys like me who have a basement studio who can pull live audiences which are larger than their anchors.
Right.
They can't. There's no competing with that at this point, right? So the alternative media is definitely going to be having the kind of this mainstream appeal, mainstream pushback. Even Piers Morgan himself has moved from like kind of the CNN style over to a more kind of palatable, uncensored style where you can get to the heart of more of these issues, because it's more palatable for people to view content that way, right? It's more it's easier, it's more palatable. It doesn't have the sort of same anxiety sense that you might get from the mainstream news broadcast, and there's way less liability, right? So
Right.
these things are all dying out, and good riddance, right? Good riddance.
Yeah, I mean, you think about like you mentioned, production cost. You're in a nicely decorated dungeon. I'm in a very boring dungeon so far because I just finished building my house. Our production cost combined is $4, and that's whatever moment the internet this takes up, and our electric budget. Although you do have a producer, which I'm very jealous of, that you can blame your problems on them because I have to eat that myself. But with
I only got one, so I could blame my problems on him. I mean, that's right? What else are they good for?
That might be worth a paycheck. Maybe I need to get a quote unquote producer for a couple grand a month.
Yeah.
But now that I think that's we've got Elon going in and tearing out some of these NGOs now, showing the government fraud and waste, things like that. But it almost feels a little bit. Even if let's say we go to the colleges today and we can't rip it out. Like it's the administrators, it's the teachers, it's now most of the students for the last decade pouring out of these. Now they're taking over the newest jobs, the newest government positions, the newest media, the newest teaching. So even if we cut things off today, we're looking at 20, 30 years before a fresh batch of human beings without the ideology comes in.
Yeah, half a century, really. About a half a century if we're lucky. It's got to be cross generationally done,
right?
And there's no way around that. Now, if you think about it, even from the time you were in school till right now in your life, think about everything which has changed from that cross generation, from the generation of your parents to when your dad was your age to the age you are right now. This is not the same world.
Right.
This is not even the same. It almost feels like it's a different universe altogether, right? The sort of meta ethics and the meta convos which happened in the United States, these were not conversations that we were having when we were younger. They were unnecessary. These were just givens, right?
Right.
Nobody was confused about their gender. Nobody was particularly sexually confused. And people didn't have these sorts of kind of dynamic issues which we see right now. The whole world is a different place. It's like stepping into a different universe. Do you ever feel like that? Like you just have stepped into a completely different universe, and it's almost bizarre, right? You live in bizarro land. And so if you have any sanity whatsoever, I think you tend to stand out. And that is a thing which is desperately needed, I think.
Yeah, I with today's society, when I was in school, I don't think I graduated with a class of 200. We weren't a big school. It was upstate farm country in New York. And so the number of seniors that graduated from my high school was probably maybe 150, 200. I can't tell you one kid that was gay. Not like I can't legitimately think of one. And it's not that, oh, well, they weren't allowed to come out or they didn't. There weren't any. And you look at the social contagion and everything happening today. And even if we get the money out of it, even if we get everything out of it, this next generation or two, and, you know, so you're looking at millennials and Z, although even though Z is correcting itself, half of them are fried out. And now we've got a 50% of our populace is just mind warped and brainwashed into this feminine, just the lens that they look at the world. And from this point, this does give you the moment of like, even though we have this resurgence and this pushback, they're just two groups that are going to be larger divided. And I don't see a gulf across these two, at least for the next generation or two. You know, I'm pulling up these videos, and at this point, I could just put every thumbnail I upload because it's hard. It's the video topic's not the hardest thing. Finding the content can be tricky. How do I label this thumbnail different than the world is absolutely insane and here's a bunch of crazy people that hate you? And that could really be every thumbnail from here on out. And
they would all be accurate.
Right. And I just don't see that bridge anymore, not only between left and right, but between masculine, feminine, between men, women, between, from the smash culture, let's just hook up on Tinder and smash, to the let's get married. I just do not see a coming together in the next 10, 20 years. I don't know how we bridge this.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think that when I look at millennials, right, people in my age group, there does seem like there was a sect of men who were kind of saved from a lot of this madness because they went to war. They were sent off to war. And a lot of them came back and they became very politically active and they became very mobilized once they understood that the world is really a confederation of large tribes who are constantly killing each other for resources. And everything that they had been told was a complete lie, including the justification for why they were sent off to these wars to begin with. I think that you could have a similar saving grace again, and God help us all. I think that it's even likely that the thing which will save or create this bridge in that when people stop worrying so much about ableism and town policing and blah, 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 is when there's a bunch of body bags that start coming from an overseas nation, from a war which was actually justified. I think that you see most of this stuff go away. If you wonder about the disconnect, right, what can reconnect it, I think that that's a possibility. But I also think that I have some faith that Gen Alpha, as young men are moving more towards masculine religion rather than the feminine sort of religion that we've been dealing with for the last 90 years. Right. They're moving towards masculine traditional religion. I think it's going to be very helpful for future generations as well. It's like, it's not that there's no hope. It's just that there's not any hope for guys like you and I, right? We're going to be fighting this war until we're dead, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it. That's our lot in life. I'm just kind of okay with that. The flip side is, though, is that we can leave the kind of roadmap behind for people who are coming, and they are coming. And I don't think that the insanity can last forever. I don't even think that it's possible because society will just break.
Oh, sure. The insanity is definitely not going to last forever because men will hit the breaking point. You know, we're here because men let women put us here. And what I mean by that is, female, there was a video I was watching today, 3 female officers that had nails, like long, pretty nails, and their hair's up in little barrettes, were trying to arrest a guy. And he just grabbed the top of 2 fence posts that was trying to take him out of a backyard. He just grabbed the top of 2 fence posts and he said, well, let's talk about this. 3 women were yanking on him. And he said, I'm not going anywhere till you explain what goes on. There's nothing they could do. I mean, at that point, yeah, nothing. They can back up and hit him with tasers or, use some hole punchers on him. But we're only here because men.
But even that's by his consent, isn't it?
Well,
like when you really think about it, even allowing them to hit him with tasers is basically done by his consent, that there might be other actual men that he may have to contend with that have become a problem, right?
Right. But
so,
and the reason why I only push back against your war statement is look what happened in Ukraine, or what is happening in Ukraine. You've got the young men, many of them did flee, but the rest of them are being, put into conscription and going off and ending for their country. And the women are in Poland, and they're showing pictures of nightlife and dating and dancing, and these women twerking on guys' graves. And the respect for what the men have done, even in this country, for Ukraine being, even in that country, the respect for what the men are going through is nil. And I understand, the world doesn't stop when men go off to battle, but shouldn't it? If you look at World War I, World War II, yeah, the women had to take a lot of the roles in the factories and things like that to provide for the men that were overseas. But now, because
they had to put screws in packs. I know it was a rough life.
Terrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's always the same type of thing where you have these apologists, again, looking at the world from the feminine view, saying, well, what do you expect them to do? Nothing all the time? And it's like, well, you could do something that would at least show some appreciation for the men that are out there, doing what they're doing, instead of hooking up with foreigners in a nightclub in another country, or even in one of your major cities. And so were that to happen here, what stops the women from going to the clubs? What stops the women from nothing?
That there's no place to flee. So,
Right.
I mean, I agree with you in a sense, and then in another sense, I kind of disagree. So the sense I agree with you is the Ukraine conflict between Russia is isolated. Now we kind of want to make it larger than life, but Ukraine's a very, it's a very tiny place ultimately. Sure. And all of the neighboring nations are available to flee to, right? So in a way, there's like an agreement, which is Ukraine. This is between Ukraine and Russia, and that's it. All these other places are neutral, friendly zones. What happens when there's no place to flee? That was World War II. That was World War I, when the entire continent is embroiled in the war. You don't get to escape. You don't get to go to neighboring Poland and enjoy the clubbing nightlife, right? There is no nightlife because they're embroiled in a war too. Global conflict is part of the nature of the 21st century. I guarantee it, just like it's going to be it was part of the nature of the 20th century. The entirety of the world going into conflict, I think, is inevitable. So that's going to be a necessary condition of globalism. I think that eventually there's going to be global conflict that will embroil the entirety of the world. And when that happens, when, not if that happens, I think that all of these kind of subsequent nonsensical problems go away. But if it doesn't happen, you still have a cross-generational roadmap to assist with the idea that masculinity is not poisonous, that Christianity is not about the feminine, that it's a patriarchal religion, that it always has been a patriarchal religion, that we follow a patriarch named Jesus Christ who incarnated as a man, right? And that our priests are men, not women, that the entire structure of it is designed around the masculine, not that feminine virtues aren't valued. They are, and women who have them are highly valued. Wouldn't it be nice if we had some, though?
Well,
Wouldn't it be nice if we had some of them? But we don't, right? We don't have them. So I still see that that men are moving in the same direction they always have, because they necessarily have the role of being the protectors in society, starting at the family level, all the way up to the national level. Women are supposed to have a counter duty to this called reproduction. They're supposed to be moving in society towards the idea of family and reproduction, and they're not. There's a failure of duty, dereliction, you could call it, on behalf of perhaps a greater societal contract, which occurs. You get all the security, we get the kids. That's the way it's supposed to work, right? Well, it's not working that way, but men are still in the position of providing the security. So if that's the case, and we have a failure in this, that needs to be rooted and addressed extremely quickly, or there's not going to be a society for us to really be arguing about in the future anyhow.
Well, I agree. Although I see us less, I see less the, we go off to war versus whoever, or I think I'm more of the mindset, and at least it seems to me that, the next conflict, or the next, I guess, real societal portion of this in its next steps would probably be more likely a continued societal split where, the top 10 or 20, perhaps even 30% of guys continue to have great success. The women chase them down. The women only want to have their children, They're the success, and at first it's the top 10% or 20% of attractive guys the women all want to sleep with and have that guy's kid. Then they want to run to the top 10 or 20% of men for their, resources and income. And the bottom 70 to 80% of men,
You're
they're
talking
going to,
about hypergamy?
well, yes, but the fallout from it, meaning that there is going to be a large, throughout history, if you look, the vast majority of men didn't procreate. It came
That's
from the
correct. About 40%. That's
right,
right.
right. And so I don't think that portion of it is new. But what I think is new, the marriage, the courtship, the financial benefits to a country and a society of men that want to earn to support families. And with all that breaking down, I see guys more making enough to make themselves comfortable and or whatever they want for their own lives, and less going out and becoming the earners. Women are trying to take that position, but that's a burnout statistic. I mean, most of these women, by the time they get to 30s, 35, 40, they realize, oh, this is a trap. And I think we're just starting to see the first women that were raised in the I don't need a man, I can have anybody's kid I want, I can be the single mom, I can handle it all. Those first women are now starting to hit not retirement age, but the window where they realize, okay, much further than this, I'm probably going to be on my own forever. These are the women yelling on X about all the handsome, good-looking, successful 35-year-olds hooking up with the 22-year-olds and not looking at the other 35. Those women are just hitting that 35 to 40 window. I believe we're going to start seeing the cascade failure of this whole movement by women. No, despite media, movies, people like Tommy Lauren and other quote unquote conservative women saying, well, men must do this. And I think men have seen the roadmap of this and they just have completely tapped out.
Yeah, I've heard something similar to this from proponents, MGTOW proponents, for instance, men going their own way. They kind of often cite this, but I don't see it. I don't see the evidence for this. So the millennials are past that age. They're moving into their 40s. And the screeching harpy feminist women are still sitting there with their cats talking about how great life is. Right? They're still screeching about how great life is when clearly it's not so great, at least for these women. I'm not sure that will be the motivating deal breaker. The motivating deal breaker right now I see if I take a bird's eye view and I'm trying to look at the political sphere for the next 100 years. First of all, that's really difficult to do, but I'm just going to try just for like the sake of trying to.
Sure.
The first is that feminism has failed to fulfill its promise to women, period, anyway, right? It has not actually liberated them from anything. It's just created debt slaves out of them. They didn't used to hold any debt. The husband carried all of the debt, and the husband had a legal obligation to take care of their family, or they went to jail, right? In the subsequent idea of the vote, or the idea of women becoming political actors, took away all of their moral high ground. You have to remember, women were able to pass the 18th Amendment before they had the right to vote with the 19th Amendment, which was the prohibition of alcohol. And I mean, they had plenty of political moxie. They've just become a voting bloc now to be pandered to. But if you look at the degrees that they're getting, and it's true that they outcompete men when it comes to getting degrees. It's like 69%. I think it'll be 73% soon. That was the last stat that I took a look at that was more modern, but they're not getting degrees in STEM. In fact, it's regressing, right? So over the last 10 years, it's been completely stagnant in STEM fields, and it's regressing further. And in trades, forget it. They just don't even exist in trades. They're a statistical anomaly. It's not to say that there's not some woman out there who's a skilled auto mechanic. I'm sure that there is, but who gives a shit? It's such a statistical anomaly that it's just not even worth discussing.
Right.
They're not going to be able to take those jobs. They're not going to be able to move into those fields. So the reliance on men is always going to be there. There's not really anything that they can do about it. But what happens then when there's a security collapse? If there's a security collapse, they don't have the necessary requisite skills to go do anything with infrastructure, nor do they have the requisite skills to even defend themselves. Those are not skill sets that women have. So the over reliance on men is what happens when men say, fuck this. How about no rights for you? What is actually the possible outcome that they could do? Well, let's look at the rest of the world. Nothing. That's the outcome. They can't do anything about it.
Right,
So
right.
you look at the rest of the world,
we've
when they go, you don't have any rights anymore.
right.
You don't.
We've
You
got,
don't have them.
but what type of collapse do you have to get there? And it is going to be catastrophic.
Population. It's going to be a population collapse.
Sure.
Well, so this is pronged too. So the population collapse, we're under reproduction rate, so we have to rely on immigrants coming in. How do you have 150 million people in the United States? What, 60 years ago, and now you have 300 million. And you look at the 30 years of mass migration progression, it's about 1 million people a year. Well, they're not bringing in the values of feminism, right? The immigrants aren't coming in with the value of my woman's rights. They're coming in with the value of screw this shit. We come from a patriarchal society. We're going to continue to have a patriarchal society here. And you're moving them into a democracy so that they're able to cross-generationally vote.
Yep.
And it's like, what happens if they just seize the system? They just vote in the system. It's like, that's a really viable future.
I think England is going to be the test bed for that. Right now you've got this. As a matter of fact, there was a new law, not a new law, but Starmer just came out today. And in the UK, the judicial system has come out and said they will have longer, harsher sentences for everybody but people with skin color, women, and under the age of 25. And when you go down through all the demographics, really what they're saying is lighter sentence for these people, or they could have just as easily said stronger punishment for white men specifically. And
Sure.
And this is it's going to be several months till they can get around and review it. But this is the irony, and I think this is why England's going to be the test bed for this particular idea. They bring in Muslim, they bring in many different cultures. Muslim seems to be the predominant. They're definitely the most anti all the things these feminists want, whether it's the LGHD TV community.
Do you know why they have to bring in Muslims? Do you know why?
Specifically, no.
Specifically, yeah, it's because the religious are the ones who reproduce.
Well,
so if you're
sure.
gonna be pulling from nations, you have to pull from nations which reproduce. Right?
Right.
You can't. The UK can't pull from France; they don't reproduce. They
I
can't pull from Western Europe; they don't reproduce. They can't pull from the United States; we don't reproduce. You have to pull from reproducing nations. So the Muslims say the womb is our weapon.
True.
And they're right.
True.
They're right.
Yeah, they will. I think in certain townships already, they're at 70 or 80% of the counties or townships in the counties in the UK. And I think there's going to be a tipping point where they're going to keep playing this game right up until they have enough for the majority. And then in an instant, it's going to be Sharia law, feminism's out the window, LGHD TV rights out the window, and the UK is going to become a Muslim territory. I mean, at that point, and ironically, the women they'll flee, they'll complain, they'll whine. There won't ever be the moment of, well, you guys did this to yourself. Like your policies did this. There will be no reflection on that.
You were the deciding vote.
Yeah.
So this is so all features that I see for feminism are feminism basically brings in the bleakest future for women I could ever imagine.
Yeah.
So it is true that perhaps under patriarchal Christianity, they would not want you involved in political processes, right? As not as though that's a bad thing, right? There's a lot of men I don't want involved in political processes either because they're dumb as a box of rocks and they nullify my very informed vote, right? Perhaps a one vote household, something like this would be a great compromise, but all roads of feminism lead to destruction of feminism itself. So we start with the rule of empathy, which is the rule of vote by women, right? All morality comes from empathy first. Reason and logic comes second. In fact, reason and logic is only used to reinforce whatever the empathetic view is. So I feel bad. Now I'll logically reconcile it. I feel bad for you. Now I'll logically come up with the reasoning behind why that's actually okay. Right? Instead of starting with the reason first, we start with the empathy first. So that model leads to generally mass migration, things like this, because that's how they vote. Well, the type of immigrants you have coming in, they don't like feminism, so they destroy feminism. It's like, okay, well, that road leads to destruction. What about a transhumanist future in the next 100 years? Well, that road leads to destruction too. What happens if we do have artificial wombs? Well, traditionally, what we can see in nations where there was a scarcity of children, they selected for men.
Yep.
Why? Because let's say you have two different types of human beings that are available to you, and you can only pick one. The first type of human being has trouble regulating their emotional clarity, has trouble regulating their hormones, and is significantly up to 60% weaker than the other type of human being.
Right.
The other one, right, has no trouble with hormone regulation, no trouble with tasks of strength, things like this. Well, which one would you select for?
Right.
Right? You generally select for the male. We can see this in China. We can see this in tons of other societies where there's a scarcity of children. If the option for selection was there, they selected the male almost every single time. So even if we had an artificial womb future, right? I don't see how that's good for women. That's like
Right.
that takes the negotiating power away from women now, and puts the selection power in the hands of men. So the very transhumanist future they wanted, where the reliance on female murder bots to enforce their rights. If we did have such a future, it's not unlikely that we would have the artificial womb technology along with the technology of the quote murder bot, which we're way far away from.
Right.
That puts the selection hand in the hands of men.
Yeah.
And it's like, that doesn't do anything good for you either. So like all roads of feminism lead to women losing their rights, absent them submitting to the patriarchy, absent them actually giving a submission to the patriarchy, because they always have to appeal to the patriarchy in order to get the patriarchy to give them rights,
Right.
Like,
Right.
no matter what.
Right.
So it's always circular, right? I have to appeal to men for rights so that I can have rights from men. It's the wildest thing ever.
I think you're missing the one, though, that I think will actually happen first, which is more than likely, if we keep going down this road, whether it's in Europe, whether it's here in the United States or whatever, the feminization of men and the no masculine role models, and that toxic masculinity and men fighting and arguing and hazing and bullying and all these other things is going to make such a generation of feminized, weak, emotional men that conquer would also be, if China, I don't know what China's count is up to, 1 billion what, but there could become a point where just the once you get past the drone wars, as we'd likely have on the next one, whichever one can't produce the way to defend themselves is ultimately, and it's ultimately at the mercy of its enemy. Well, you look at the sheer number of people that you've got in some place, and I use China just because they're an easy target, but they have the 3 or 4 times the number we have, and on top of that, I don't know what the percentage of our items come from there. But if they turn off, if they just quickly take over Taiwan, turn off the chips, turn off the steel production, turn off all, yes, you can talk about their economy collapsing. But if they just then wait for us to deteriorate enough that they can, outproduce us during the war, which is one of the reasons why World War II, we were able to turn factories around so quickly, and we had this unlimited supply of ammos and weapons and et cetera, et cetera. If they can shut that down, they'll just waltz in, and there won't be a masculine man to fight them, and they will impose their masculinity in a different way, but nonetheless, it'll still.
Well, Elon Musk rightly points this out, that the crisis in reproduction of humanity is a global phenomenon. It is true that right now China has over 1 billion people, but they're actually slated by the middle of the century to have only 500 million.
Right.
Their one-child policy completely devastated their ability to repopulate their own nation. They see that error and corrected it as quickly as possible, but they're going to be feeling the effects of it. South Korea is below 1 per woman, and that's not going to change. That's going to continue to dip, and the United States will dip under on the average of 1 child per woman as well, contracting its population as well. Japan, same thing. Massive reproduction crisis, can't sustain its own population. Very xenophobic people in Japan, rightly or wrongly, whichever way you want to call it. I don't think there's anything wrong with Japan want to keeping their nation Japanese. I don't think there's any problem with that. But for the first time ever, they need to perhaps rely on immigrant labor. They're talking about bringing in hundreds of thousands of immigrants in order to assist with the thing that they desperately need the most, which is elder care.
Right.
And this is a big problem when you have, less grandchildren than you have grandfathers, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
You now have a significant problem when it comes to elder care. So they're looking at that. Other nations are beginning to look at that, and where are they drafting them from? Well, they can't draft these people out of the Western nations or even the Eastern Bloc nations, because they have a below reproduction rate. So where are they getting them? They get them from Muslim nations. They get them from India, right? What are we talking about here? H-1B visas for who? Indians, right?
Right.
It's still a large reproduction rate there. And the propaganda is all around like, hey, these are great people. They're high IQ, blah, blah, blah. Bring them in, bring them in, bring them in, bring them in. But I don't know if people are aware that in the Indian culture, the men there really misogynistic, like really misogynistic. Not big fans of this whole women's rights stuff. You know,
Right.
they're not very happy about it. It's like, so all of these roads lead to population collapse, and population collapse then being kind of you have to subsidize for your GDP and everything else on immigrant labor. What choice do you have? And women and their voting patterns basically will lead you to the very destruction of the very society that they wanted to be liberated in, and bring in a core group of people who then subjugate them.
Right.
This is like the wildest, craziest thing ever. If you want to know, like, how do you fix that? Well, I think Trumpism is making some type of broad attempt to fix this. So Trumpism is like, look, um, no more immigration, right? But he's failed on the promise of stopping mass migration and moved over to the Musk idea of H-1B visas. That's really bad for us. The promises of the tariffs were supposed to be the same thing, put us in a more isolated format. He was supposed to do some type of structure from the top down on family dynamics. He did a good job saying there's only two genders, but he also needed to say things like, we need a mass propaganda campaign for the family and for respect of men, and that they have the rightful head of families because of the protector class of society, right?
Right.
These are all things that we need from the government level that we're not getting. So until some of those things start happening, there's no end in sight for any of this.
And
There's
if
just no end.
and if you notice, all the countries that are struggling with repopulation, and every single one of them is westernized, and it's almost feminism. Because if you look at, I occasionally do videos on marriage and the dating events that they have in China. Feminism's leaked into China in itself, that they're requiring men to have more property, more money, be better, to be more financially giving, but also be taller, more attractive. And even that's leached into socialist China, that we're in a place where every westernized country, and to the point where, South America now, you get down into Mexico, some of the protests in Brazil that you see on a much, much smaller scale. Maybe they're behind where we are by 10 or 15 years. But all of these countries have adopted feminism and putting women in the work world and making them not dependent on men, and not see the benefits and appreciate family. And in every case, their selfishness, for lack of a better word, has allowed them to go rogue.
Well, it's not just there. North Korea. So North Korea, of all
Well,
places,
I think they're starving to death.
well, done out of necessity. There was a great famine there. But yeah, even in North Korea, because there was a great famine which happened there, men were giving their food to their wives, children, things like this. The population of men decreased drastically, and the Kim dynasty was forced to make a choice. Do we have a standing military or don't we? Because it's contracted in a major way, and so they made the service compulsory.
Yeah.
And so feminism, in a way, even there is leaching in the population dynamic and collapse of these various nations. Feminism is not helpful at all, but is most often touted as some kind of solution, and it's never a good solution, and it's never been a good solution. And ultimately, it must be resisted at all levels. And there's no country who's unaffected by it, and there's no nation have the well poisoned by it before the end of feminism itself, which is going to be a requirement of finally society shrugging it off and saying, well, these ideas of egalitarianism and these ideas of equality between men and women, that's exactly what they always were, untrue ideas.
Right.
And ultimately, when put into practice, they don't work, and they lead to the utter ruination and destruction of the nation. So I think as the roadmap becomes a little more clear here, there's a lot to be concerned about, but there's also some things in which maybe to take some joy in the fact that It is true that the religious are the ones who are the most likely to reproduce, and it is true that the religious are moving towards more traditional forms of religiosity. That gives me great hope for the future in the numbers game for shrugging off and destroying feminism on behalf of the patriarchy. And that's a long roadmap, but still one that's very viable for humanity.
Well, I think the natural course is going to be that the more right wing, the more religious, the more people that are into family and teaching their children good moral lessons and the religious factor of it, versus the other side that wants to wipe out their own children before they're even born, and that will cause a rightward swing over time. I guess the question is going to be: I don't want to call myself necessarily conservative, but will the logic minded, will the rational minded have enough control and be able to will be able to control the narrative long enough to make this actually happen, or will the totalitarian or authoritarian or feminism or whatever else, because they're all almost tied together today, will that grab enough power at a various point to do enough damage that, just look at, like we were talking about earlier, the
demographics are destiny. Demographics are destiny.
In the long
and
term,
the thing is like the demographics don't look good for women. It doesn't look good. It looks like the sex in which you are, the religious sex which are reproducing, which you need to rely on, are the ones who have a patriarchal infrastructure and a patriarchal ecclesiastical authority that they adhere to, and it does not look good for these women. The future looks very bleak. Right? It looks very bleak for the numbers game for them.
Well, while I initially might, in the long term, yes, but within our lifetimes, at least you, I, and everybody that's probably listening to this, you take something as simple as Canada's upcoming elections. You've got conservatives ahead by a decent margin. And because Trump does some tariff things and they get into it a little bit now, the left is ahead by 10 to 12 points. Then you look what's going on in Germany, and you look what's going on in the UK and in France and in these other countries. There is a real possibility they destroy themselves with emotional response to what they hear in the news or what they see on Twitter or X or whatever. There's a good chance that they destroy at least what we've got going on now before we get to the correction and the turnaround. Wouldn't you agree?
I'm not sure. It's it's on the edge of a knife. I want to, in many ways, agree with the assessment and say, look, it's like it's a race to who gets there first. What you're talking about is the ability of demographics to seize power, right? So which demographic seizes it first? Is it going to be the kind of conservative, traditional minded people who seize power inside of these various democracies, or is it going to be the more theocratic types who get there first? I'm not sure, and nobody knows the answer to this very important question. But what is true is that authoritarians are going to seize power through democracy, and there's not enough numbers to stop them, because the people who are, I don't know if you would call them liberty-minded or rights-minded, they don't reproduce. And if you don't reproduce, you don't have the destiny demographics that you need to keep your nation intact. And that's that. So authoritarianism is coming, whether you like it or not. There's not much that can be done to stop that at this point, because it's just a people's game. It's a numbers game. You know what I mean? And they got them. We don't. It's that simple. And we're not. And until we do something about that, or until we look at this as a top-down problem, and eventually the government will. Eventually the military is going to say, wait a second, we're going to have to start doing something here, because we don't have the bare necessity for the defenders required in the nation. They're never hitting their goals. They're never hitting their recruiting numbers. They're always short. People are washing out constantly. And eventually they're going to have to do some kind of top-down birth rate program, like Hungary has done and various other nations are attempting now to do, in order to incentivize the people to even reproduce in the nation they exist in. That's something which not only has to happen, but it is likely it will happen. But to your question, I don't know. Nobody knows the answer to that question just yet.
I guess I try to break things down into I try to figure out time frames. I mean, that to me is usually the most important. If X happens, what do the next 4, 10, 20, 30 years look like? And as far as I can tell right now, this next generation, while they are this is the first generation, I think, maybe since boomers, that have now hopped back and started to become more conservative than the previous ones. Somewhere along the line, I think men and conservative and logic and resilience and intelligence needs to have a resurgence to the point where they actually show up, they actually vote, they actually talk about the issues. They leave me alone, I just want to go into the woods and escape forever. You can't do that because the activists that want to control this system are coming out. And so, me personally, we often joke around about, just go John Galt or move into a cabin in the middle of the woods. But I think that's disservicing the next generations to come, because we are in a battle. This is a war, whether you want to call it the war of culture, the war of feminine versus masculinity, the war of authoritarian versus whatever they want to call it, freedom, democracy, which has been a pirated word. There's a point where you say, well, we got to fight. And I don't think anybody that's the freedom, well, not anybody, but I don't think enough freedom-loving, freedom-minded people have a battle plan, have a game plan. I just think they're reactive to what the other side does. But by then, you're a step or two behind. And I don't know how we motivate and or amass to make some changes in both socially and politically.
Well, you do it through not just political participation, but by meeting the enemy on every single battleground you can possibly find them on and eviscerating them. Every single talk show where their stupid little safe spaces are, where they feel like they get the words and then you talk and then you talk. Go get right in their stupid faces. Go get right in their faces. Call them what they are, a bunch of dirty feminist scumbags who are responsible for the damnation of the West.
Right.
And tell them that they need to get off the program. They need to get out of here. They're worthless. They're useless. They're mouth breathers, and they're idiots on top of all of that, right? And not just me, not just you, not just, a few men in mass need to do this. The Crucible, I think, has in some ways been pivotal in training the next generation of great, sophisticated, patriarchy-minded debaters who can make really great arguments designed to destroy the opposition's worldview logically and also appeal rhetorically to their emotion.
Yeah.
Right. And you need to have a combination of both. You have to reach both sects, right? Those who are emotionally minded and logically minded. So the thing is like, you need to attack on all fronts all the time, nonstop, with participation. The men going their own way to do what? You know what I mean? How about instead of going your own way, you get in the way? That's what I want to see. Get in the way of these people who are obvious lunatics, leftist lunatics, feminists. I mean, there's just monsters everywhere. And it's like, why aren't we fighting with them? Well, but by the way, that's also fun, right? It's also fun to fight with these bastards.
Well, sure. Especially on social media when you ratio them into the dirt. But I think that's one of the misconceptions of men going their own way. It doesn't necessarily mean they go John Galt. It just means I've decided I'm going to live my way, the way I want to live. And it doesn't mean you don't. And again, it's not necessarily a movement, but a philosophy where it's I'm going to live my life the way I want to live. Now, if I want to live and have a wife, I'm going to have a wife, but she's going to follow my masculine lead. If I'm going to have a girlfriend, now many men say I'm not going to get married and put myself at the mercy of the courts by doing anything legally, but I will take a woman into my life. And if she screws around and she messes up and she's not following what I feel is best interest for me and a family unit, out you go. And so,
I guess my attempt wasn't to try to strawman the position of MGTOW. Like I understand that many of these kind of proprietary definitions get used and abused and beaten up on and mischaracterized and this kind of thing. And that's not what I'm trying to do.
No, no, no.
Obviously,
I know that.
you're much more familiar with what the kind of core meanings of that is. But
Sure.
I guess I was just making like a tongue-in-cheek
Sure. No.
reference, like, you know, don't let them even hijack the language, right?
Right.
If you're a man, not only get involved, but the men's rights activists and advocacy groups, they actually have a good push and a good leg to stand on now. We have tons of data now for how children actually need dad in a big way. We have the data now that supports the fact that women are abusers, and that when the father's not at home, the results for the kid is terrible, and
Right.
that the results for kids who are raised in single father households, generally they're better. We have a big leg to stand on now to make these arguments from both my view, the Christian view, or perhaps the MGTOW view, the Manosphere view. There's a lot of things which we can kind of come together on here for the purpose of a more kind of patriarchal, masculine type of society. And
Sure.
these ideas need to be thought about incessantly. And everywhere that these stupid feminists have their little spaces, you know, their little cluck talk shows and this, get in there, invade them. You know what I mean? Don't let them have a moment's rest. Don't let them have a moment's peace.
Right.
You know, and do the same thing that these bastards have been doing to us for 60 years. Don't give them a breath. Don't let them even take a breath.
I think the way the men are doing it, young men are doing it today, and I know you weren't being disparaging towards guys going their own way, because in many ways you're right, but I think the younger generation, at least when you look at Gen X, we were definitely checked out of politics. We were checked out of social issues because everything was good. You know, everything made sense. Everything was sane. And I think the deeper we go into this, the more that you're finding, whether it's men's content, whether it's religious content, whether it's conservative content, whether it's freedom, libertarian, whatever it is, you're seeing more and more of this pushback. But this is and I want people to understand the type of fight that is coming up, because whether you watch Charlie Kirk debating leftists, whether you watch Michael Knowles going on and arguing with these, college feminists or whatever, or Ben Shapiro, or whoever, or you watch my content or yours, this is a perfect example. We have proven now, and I'll just use this because it's a universal one that's very easy to understand. We have proven why the wage gap exists. Hours worked, extra shifts, overtime, men having second jobs, men having a stronger drive. We can put into actual studies and numbers, here's why there is a disparagement in pay, and it has nothing to do with equal job, this, that. We put it all out on paper, and then you hear Barack Obama come out 15 hot minutes later, and mainstream news and feminists and everybody else just perpetuating the lie, even though we have the studies. I think we're in a place now where we can definitively prove that men need to be in kids' lives, and that, fathers and masculinity, we can prove all of this. And then not only do you have the dummies up on the mainstream news, but people like Tommy Lauren and other conservatives coming out and fighting back against us as well. And there's a certain point you have to say, we're arguing with idiots. We're arguing with people that do not use any logic. They refuse to step back and see the nature of the world, and they will continue until everything falls apart.
Yeah, that's true. But the nature of here's the nature now in the 21st century is that we're in an information war, massive information war. And really, when you take a step back and you think about what it is that you do, what are you doing all day? You're correcting information, right?
Right.
You're correcting bad information. You're correcting bad talking points. You're correcting information. That is what you are doing. But the way in which we can engage in combat now in the verbal age, in the data age, in the information age is debate. Sure. Debate is the new form of verbal combat. And in the information age, it is the tool and the weapon of the man. And the more logical the man, the more likely it is that he can change the hearts and minds of the lunatics who exist. But even if you can't change theirs, you can reach their hundreds of thousands that they reach on their own platforms. And you can siphon away from the madness. And I get thousands upon thousands of messages from various people. I've done exactly that. You've done exactly that. How many, right. Let me ask you this. How many emails or DMs have you gotten from people who literally just said this? I never fucking knew any of that shit.
Right. Right.
They literally just say those words. Like,
Yep.
I didn't know any of that. How did I not know any of that?
Right.
How?
Yep.
And then they feel lied to, right? And then what happens, right? They also become part of that characterization of correcting information. So that's the effect that you have. But it's like the more reach on these shows that you can get to in order to correct that information, the better off we're going to be, right? That's the way you fight the fight. Go ahead.
You basically are speaking the war of attrition. You just you just keep swallowing up 0.01 or 0.2 or whatever percentage and bring them in, and then hopefully they keep disseminating the information, and then they become one that will then speak that information.
Isn't that what the communists did to us?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they pretty much did the exact same thing. I'm just talking about doing it in reverse.
Yeah.
Yes, attrition. Absolutely attrition. As I often say in the middle of before I go on TikTok to do an invasion, right? Many of you may not make it in this conflict, but that's a risk I'm willing to take. Okay, that's a risk that I am willing to take.
Right.
The thing is it is an actual war. The kind of dynamics for the social war have changed. It's no longer as physical as combat like this may have been in the past, but it doesn't matter. The tools and weapons at our disposal now are logic, reason, data correction, the ideas of also the humiliation that you can put and produce on lunatics like Tommy Lauren, who you ask them, what is the equivalent duty for women that men have when it comes to protection? And they say nothing. It's just innate in you. You like doing that shit.
Right.
You love it. It's your favorite. You wake up in the morning and the first thing you think of is, well, I got to go protect me some women. And like, no, we don't, lady. Not only do we not think that, lady, right? But also, nobody wants to do a bunch of objectionable self-sacrifice for a bunch of ungrateful, bratty, I hesitate to say the word. I don't know where you're streaming to, but bitches, right? Catty bitches,
sure,
who are like, well, you love the protection role. It's innate. You were born with it, And it's like, well, what are you born with? Nothing.
Yeah.
I just look hot. Look at me. I look hot.
And that is the crutch that these women eventually have, is that, men require, and I think this is actually the battle for the soul of the country. If I had to use a word, it would be for the soul. And because what feminism has done is confused women to the point where they not only want to be men, look like men, act like men, but they want to take the roles of men up to a point, and then they'll go no further. And what they're running into now is that they're going to ostracize themselves to such a degree that young men today, well, and even older men at this point, really, women have changed society to the point where men are now accepting, to some degree, that they're equal. Now, do we really think they're equal, different and equal and blah, blah, blah? Well, sure, but no. Because, again, there's the physical portion. Men will do the jobs. Women won't do. Men are basically the ground level of everything. The society is built on the backs of men. And were those men to go away, everything would fall apart in an instant. But the women refuse to see that. And so I think society at the bedrock level will be fine, because guys will continue to do what we need to do, because we have to survive. We have to get along. No one gives us bailouts and the rest of it. But what I think is happening now is men are seeing the nature of women, and men are saying, you don't bring, and this is what you were discussing on the Piers Morgan, you're not offering virtue, you're not offering virginity, you're not offering femininity, you're not offering a stay-at-home mother, you're not offering being a wife and a good mother to the kids and being a teacher and an educator in the home. That's what a lot of men, a massive amount of men, actually want. And instead they're getting argumentative, angry women that say, well, I bring money. Well, that does me no good, because money doesn't come from the women to the masculine men. No. It only goes outwards. So it
goes down from them to the women.
Right.
So, women tend not to share their wealth, and men tend to share their wealth. Isn't it interesting how that works?
And when they do share it, they bitch. 100%.
You owe them. You owe them.
Right. Right.
It's like a loan. It's like a loan with interest on it. But the thing is so funny is, like, what you're saying is descriptively true. But one of the things in the red pill space is I've always tried to engage in very good faith with people who advocate for red pill positions or MGTOW positions, because I think that I need to really understand the arguments of what it is people are saying, why they're saying it, so I can even reason if what they're saying is true, not true, this or that. So the way I view the red pill is I view it as a set of social descriptors, not prescriptors. There's no prescriptions really. It's a data packet. It's kind of up to you what you do with this information. How it's strawmanned is they say, no, the red pill is Andrew Tate, or the red pill is Rollo Tomasi, the red pill is this guy, the red pill is that guy. They are the red pill. The red pill is Myron Gaines. It's not a sequence of individuals, but a sequence of descriptors for descriptive realities so that people can take that information and do what needs to be done with that information. But what do we do prescriptively, right? That's really the questions. Like the manospheres existed a long time, but what prescriptively do we move to? What we move to is social crusade. The social crusade is where we need to be moving collectively. And the social crusade needs to entail, like, if there's a line that you can call that one of these feminists has for the little talk shows or the little, like, call them to give a piece of your mind. Tell these broads what's up.
Right.
You don't have to take a single step back ever. And by the way, part of the social crusade, you can do it. You get off of work, you're on your way home, give the show a call, tell them what you think. You know what I mean? You don't have to take any shit from any of these people.
Right.
There's reasons why you shouldn't, in fact. One, they're really fucking stupid. Two, their prescriptions are terrible for society. And three, you ain't going to have a society unless you start moving towards a prescriptive social crusade to change this stuff. And the way you're going to do that right now is by blitzing the media. And we can do it. And they can't straw man the positions of everybody. And some of us are very articulate and can easily, with ease, slice and dice these people into nothing. And we're not. But we need to be. We need to be, and we need it in the worst way.
Well, I think, and I agree with you. And I think that, the red pill started out, red pill, manosphere, etc., started out. I can't even put on a date on exactly when it started out, but even Tom Likas back on the AM radio was talking about a lot of these issues, and so many times it gets tossed out as a pejorative or a negative, and in reality, when you start breaking down kind of what men are asking for, and the men that are in men's spheres, manosphere, red pill, etc., what they're really talking about is traditional and conservative. Even more so than people that call themselves traditional conservatives. I'll give you a good example. You take someone like Michael Knowles, speaks quite openly about religion, speaks quite openly about family units and health and all this other stuff. And then he goes out and interviews this Nala Fitness, who's an Only Fools worker, twice, who said she's converted to religion, and he platforms her. And then you've got people like myself and others on kind of this side of men's issues that says, why are you talking to her? Why are you platforming somebody that is absolutely awful instead of somebody that has some real values, that has always been a role model? And because you're trying to treat this woman as a win because she somehow converted, yet is still doing thirst stuff on TikTok.
When you revenge.
Well, sure.
You realize it's a revenge. So the idea, so one of the things, I've called the Daily Wire out from massive platforms and told Knowles and these guys, I'm happy to do a 1v1 debate. My live viewer count's way bigger than your guys' anyway. It's like, you're not losing anything by doing this.
Right.
So why not? Let's have a tangle. Let's have a live debate on these issues. They refuse. They absolutely refuse to do it. But because of that kind of innate cowardice, which comes out of that organization where they just won't refuse to engage unless they can just straw man the position, right? They would rather take the effigy, hang the effigy up, yell at the effigy. That's a really safe thing to do. Really difficult when the effigy's yelling back, right? When he's like, no, that's wrong. That's a mischaracterization of the position. Here's what's actually going on. Can you respond to the actual argument? Then it becomes something altogether different, doesn't it? So the thing that's so interesting about this is that I think that there's forms of social revenge, which various organizations do against, like the quote manosphere, things like this. I can give you stories on this. In fact, Brian Atlas of the Whatever podcast, who has good relations with the Daily Wire, has tried a multitude of times to set up a massive red pill versus the trad conservative kind of viewpoints. Like, let's just hash this out. Let's do a 6-hour debate like we used to do in the old times, right? Let's really get these issues on the table. Total refusal.
Right.
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 The Charlie Kirks and TPUSA of the world, unless they can have a resistance-free policy. I've destroyed so many TPUSA feminists at this point on the various programs, I've lost count, right? If they can't have a resistance-free, no pushback environment, they're just not very interested. And the thing is like, so keep pushing. Like, keep pushing until they can't ignore you. Keep pushing until they must have the confrontation. Then necessarily they'll have to start changing their views. They don't have a choice because you can't argue with what's true.
Right.
You can't.
And you being a debater, as you've stated, like that's kind of your famously a debater. The men's communities that kind of, whether you're doing what I'm doing or many of the hundreds of thousands of others at this point, we were born in adversity. Like, we're born, not literally, but you
merely adopted it.
but when you think about it, like when I started my channel and many others started their channels to start to grow in this, we're labeled everything in the world. We're called all these names, and we had to argue every single point that we have in the face of adversity. And we have to prove data that shows why our points that we say what we are. And even they get misconstrued that, well, they're just incels, so they're not, where many of them are married, many of them are conservative, many of them have many other views. They're just not adopting what's being spoon-fed them. And I think because of this adversity and because of this struggle to speak out the points, I think that's where we want the debates, we want the discussions, we want the arguments. And whether it's conservative, whether it's liberal or leftist or socialist or religious or whatever, so many of them just refuse to have that conversation because they're going up against someone that was forged in fire, that has had those battles, had those arguments, has the data, has the knowledge. And at any point, if you start calling them out on any of it, bringing the maths and the data and the logic behind it, I think most of them fall apart at this point.
Yeah,
and
they do. Well, you're right. Listen. Not only are you absolutely right, but I don't even think you know how right you are here. So, the truth is that these trad cons, the trad conservative side, right, and the representation have been so resistant to engagement inside of these spheres. Whereas I had complete ease of access when it came to engaging with the Manosphere in debate, in argumentation, and things like this. In fact, they couldn't wait. Yeah, bring it on, right? Bring it on. And now there's plenty of pickup artist scumbags and things like this who I've decimated. And there's plenty of actual feminists inside of the Manosphere too, male feminists, who basically, they're part of the promiscuity crowd. And left-wing men benefit from feminism in a big way, right? Because they like to have sex with lots of chicks. That's like their shtick. Right. And sexual liberation's been great for them. So, of course, they mobilize behind it and want to continue to push it up, that form of societal degeneracy. But they have been willing to, like, let's do this. And by the way, if you're uninformed on something, or this isn't what a thing means, like, let me give you some clarity. Here's what we're actually saying. Right. And if if you don't straw man their position and allow them to lay it out, right, you find, wait a second, there's a lot more here than perhaps once we thought. You know what I mean?
Right.
No, it's not to say all the descriptors are correct. It's not to say that everything that's coming out of these spheres is right, because it's not. But it is to say that it needs to be contended with in a big way. And they just refuse to do it. And it's because you hit the nail on the head. If that happens, the worldview shatters, it falls apart. And most of the base of this is based around egalitarianism, the ideas of egalitarianism. And this begins to shatter the picture, the perfect picture that you have of the egalitarian society that never really was.
Right. And ironically, so many, whether you want to talk about communities or news or media or whatever, comes out and attacks. And I don't like the term red pill, to be quite frank with you. Nor do I like the term manosphere, but because it's been so poisoned now by,
it gives you a reference for what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. And it's hard because now, and this is something when you did your video there, and I keep referencing this one because it just went so viral. is because when you have people arguing with you, and they say they tie the words of incel and Andrew Tate and Manosphere and feminist or misogynist and all these words together so tightly, they do that as a protection mechanism, because once you really disseminate what we're discussing without doing the straw man, without propping up false idols like Andrew Tate, you realize that it's not a solid thing. It's just like saying, well, religion is X. Well, there's a whole lot of different religions out there. And here, kind of red pill manosphere, whatever, has been thrown into all these different, whether it's, and like you were mentioning, the dating coaches versus pickup artists versus men going their own way versus trad cons versus, really it's a multitude of different flavors of ideas. And when you really start boiling them all down, really most of it comes to the lack of respect for men, the lack of accountability and ability for men to do what they need to do, and the feminization of everything. And that really, because if you look at the pickup artist, it was men used to ask out women, and men used to desire women, men used to want to date women. And now they've changed it into a game because the women changed the game. If a woman required an engagement ring, if a woman required a man to have a good job, if a woman required a promise for forever before she slept with a guy, boom, dating pickup artist gone instantly. It's just obliterated. And guys would be doing videos on here's how you get the best job, and here's how you find the best flowers for a girl. Like, that would all change. And so really at the heart of it, it's just a massive amount of men that are saying, I don't like society. I don't like what you've done with it. I don't think we're headed in a good direction. And here's all my problems with it. And here's how to game it. And here's how to use it against them. And that's really all it boils down to, is a bunch of disenfranchised guys that say, you've broken absolutely everything. And we're trying to figure out either how to game the system, or how to fix it, or how to change it, or how to escape from it. That's really what it all boils down to.
Yeah. How do I win, or how do I escape?
Yeah.
And the escape is the win, right? And so, look, there's a lot of what you're saying here that I agree with. And ultimately, I think, though, again, these are descriptors. Like you're giving great descriptors. This descriptively is what's happening. I agree with that. What I'm looking at, I'm trying to look past that into the prescriptor, right? One guy I talked to about this, Myron Gaines, interestingly enough, he looks towards prescriptors. Now, you may not agree with any of his prescriptors, right? But he's still looking towards the prescriptor. What do we do about it, right? And I just don't see any other way than a social crusade. And the thing is like, and here's the thing, Joker, fuck these people.
Right,
like,
right.
Why do we need to escape? Why we don't need to escape? Like beat the hell out of them every chance you get verbally. I'm talking about verbally and in the arena of ideas, but like, just kick the holy tar out of these people on all these TV shows everywhere.
But we are, and here's how we do it. Here's how a lot of the guys are doing it. How's Disney doing? How's Hollywood doing? Right. How's Hollywood?
I think Disney didn't do very well this last game up, did they?
Right. But when you look at Disney, Hollywood, HBO on stream, Paramount, these TV networks, sports shows that started talking about DEI and feminism. A lot of the ways to fight back is, and this is where I think a lot of guys have gone. And I agree with you. There are people out there that say, this is what we need to do. And that's one prescriptive, but there's another prescriptive. And it's really in essence, the easiest one. Okay. Marvel's went woke. I'm not going to watch. They need my money. I'm not going to give it to them. Same thing with this car company. Same thing with this. Same thing with this. So what a lot of guys are doing, they're not necessarily leaving society. I think the guys going their own way or whatever. They've been, I'm just not going to interact with this stuff anymore. We're very present. I'm one of the first one that says I boycott just about everything, including Coke for their anti-whiteness campaign 4 years ago. Haven't sipped a Coke since, right?
Pepsi's better anyway.
but I'm not sitting here having a podcast, although I have done, I talk about these topics. But there's a lot of guys today that say, well, there's many ways I can win this. I don't think I need to go out and have a don't think I need to go out and have a protest. I don't need to go out and put a video of my own. But I'm going to save my money and not waste it on first dates with women that just want to use me for. And I'm not going to buy these products from companies that hate me. And instead, I'm going to buy some land. I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to maybe learn how to farm. And that's just one extreme example. But others are just, I'm not going to go to Hollywood movies anymore. I'm going to use my money as my vote. And they still vote. But even if it's just quietly, what seems to be passively not participating, that is done more in many cases than people screaming. And to give a good example is whether you look at, Bud Light had a lot of screaming, but very quiet things where people just say, I'm not going to say anything about this, but I'm not going to go watch this movie. I'm not going to say anything about this, but I'm not going to spend my money with this company anymore. And
look, I totally agree with this point that the boycott, the ideas for the boycotts and the various things which are going on, when people make garbage, you don't go see garbage, right? That makes complete sense to me. The idea of the kind of voting with your wallet has always been a great power that society has, right? In order to shut down social things that we don't like, we don't appreciate, this and that. But we're also dealing on the flip side of this with massive NGOs, which will fund $3 billion movies, or whatever, with the message, even knowing that they're going to flop because they don't care, right? Because these people are ideologues. They don't care. Disney took the Star Wars franchise and completely destroyed it, right? And they're going to continue to completely destroy it. And the thing is they're always going to have enough of this kind of external sourced money, sometimes even foreign money, who is interested in the weakness of the United States, to continue to produce this garbage. Now, maybe you don't go watch it, you know what I mean? But there's enough people who do. And so I'm not saying that methodology doesn't work. It's great. I'm like, more power to you. I'm glad that you're doing it. I'm saying that we can have a multi-pronged approach here, where some of us are great at some aspects and some aren't. But either way, it's all fighting the same fight on a social crusade for the advocacy of change on behalf of men and on behalf even of women who need to begin to adhere to their social duties, right? This needs to happen.
The irony is that you take someone like myself and many others that are in, again, this type of arena, whether you want to call it guys going their own way, red pill, manosphere, whatever. Most of us that are most vocal about this absolutely love women. That's what they never understand, is that it's not that we hate women. It's what we hate what women are doing, and we hate what they've become, and we don't want them to be what they are now, because now they're undesirable and they're broken. And you can picture yourself at the edge of a cliff, and there's an endless line of women who are jumping off of it. And the next one comes up, and you go over and you're like, look at all the bodies down there. My God, they're all dead. Look for your own eyes. It's terrible. This is all. Please don't jump off this cliff. At the bottom of it, you're going to be smashed into oblivion. And they go. And then the next one comes up, and you say that you try to make the same arguments. You're trying to stop them, and then they go. And it's this kind of like ongoing revolving door. But here's the thing. It's nice. Occasionally you get to steal them out of that line, right? You get to grab one and go, let's get you out of here. True. And most of the time they don't just jump off. They look at you, call you a misogynist first, then they jump.
Yeah. But they jump halfway down. They go, you did this. Right? You did this.
Well, not all men are going out and getting in the faces of women, and there is an argument to be had that yes, going out and screaming in their faces, but did Tommy change her? And this is the way I think maybe is the correct framing of this. Did Tommy Lauren change her mind because of you yelling at her? No, but
100,000 people who watched it did.
Right, exactly. Did many of the people watching, and maybe that's the key to it. As many of these weirdos, as many times as Hollywood fails with the NGO money and all the rest of us, no matter how much we yell at them, we may not change their minds, but maybe the sane people listening and the people that are on the fence, or the, as you call it, the knife's edge, maybe we can pull them off. And that's one way to look at this. The other way, and this is something that is my contention that I think works very well, is that many men today are taking the boycott and this was the kind of what I was bringing up before, but they're taking the boycott and they're extending it to romance. They're extending it to marriage. They're extending it to dating. They're extending it to working for companies who they don't align with. And there's, I think, going to be a renaissance of blue collar guys that can make $100,000 being the electrician, the welder, the technical guy, because so many people are going off to college and wasting their money thinking that we actually have a shortage of blue collar men. I think there's going to be a resurgence of maybe not this generation, but the next generation of women that see these crazy women out there doing all the crazy stuff in their 30s and 40s, talking about the guys they're hooking up with and talking about hookup culture as they're 45 and overweight, realizing, well, they're not happy. I think there's going to be a large boycott by men in general of just a lot of things they don't agree with. And while that in and of itself may not be a get in your face moment, and it may take a heck of a lot longer, it's at least the minimum people can do that want to push back against this. You don't like Only Fools? Don't subscribe to it. Shame everybody you know that subscribes to it. Call them a loser, call them out, make fun of it. Are you going to save everybody? No, because Bonnie Blues still does a video and 100 guys in balaclavas show up to masked sleep with her. You know, you're not going to save them all. But the more we can talk about the absurdity, the more we can show it out, the more we can make women hate the market they've made by boycotting or not participating. I think all of it is battling the fight on every front we have. I think that's the big thing.
Sounds a lot like a social crusade, my friend.
It
Right?
is. It is. Not maybe not so many words.
It is. It sounds an awful lot like a and here's the thing, right? It hasn't been a long time coming anyway. Like it's been a long time coming anyway. And if these people are going to be fruitcake, lunatic, crazies, we might as well have some fun with them while we're at it. You know what I mean? There's no reason to let them run roughshod. And like, you remember that gay dude who was on, right?
Oh,
this gay dude's on, and he's telling me about what masculinity is and what the dynamics are between men and women.
Right. And it's like, dude, you've never
women don't owe you anything. And it's like, well, here's the thing, right? Then I don't owe them anything.
Right.
And ultimately, right, the thing is so ironically hilarious about this is how is it that the other two social conservatives are here backing up the gay dude's opinion, right? Who's a complete leftist among other things. And it's like, look, get real. Screw this. And the optics for you people is terrible anyway. It's awful. You might be able to point at me and say, hey, look, maybe that guy swears a little bit too much. He smokes on stream. Sometimes I like to have a few drinks on stream too. And it's awful. But you're dealing with societal destroyers here.
Right.
And so it's like, maybe I'm not the kind of perfect messenger, and neither are you. But that's what we got.
Right.
That's what we got.
And the poisoning against masculinity is so strong and so ingrained into everybody that you've got conservatives now yelling at men that are in some ways more conservative than those men are. And you've got them lining up with the feminists on the left to attack us. And I think that's why we don't get the debate.
And the feminists on the right.
Well,
the feminists on the right.
Sure.
Who pretentiously pretend that, what I heart the patriarchy. You know why I heart the patriarchy? Because you can do all sorts of shit for me and I'm going to let you.
Right.
And that's what a real man does. You do a bunch of stuff and I am going, and you get to watch me benefit from it like a real man.
Well,
and it's like, what?
The clip, and I don't have the clip pulled up, but the part that Tommy said that really like blew my mind. I was yelling at the funny thing is, if you watch my YouTube video, it was like 30 minutes. My actual live stream was about 2 hours. It was about 2 hours on Rumble. Thank you, sir. And I edited so much out of it because I just was raging and not nonsense. It's not like I was going in gibberish, but where my anger stems from is the passive way that so many people just assume you need to do this because this is the way it's always done. Wait a minute, for men. But when we say, yeah, but what about women? This is what we want from women. You owe us something. It used to be you gave us something. Being a mom, being a stay-at-home mom, being the mother to my children, and we stayed together, taking care of a home, whatever it was, you at least gave something. And now today, no matter how conservative or feminist or whatever a woman is, you listen to some of these women on podcasts, they say, well, I want a man that makes good money. And he's tall and he's handsome. Well, why do you want tall and handsome? Well, he's masculine. He's protective. Okay, so he's protective. He provides for you. Are you coming with, what are you coming with? Well, I'm funny. Don't care. My dog's funny. I'm good company. So's my dog. I bring money, not my money. I'm fun to hang out. I got friends. Like everything they bring is nothing to men. They've lost so much. They've lost touch with what men want so much they don't even understand us anymore. And the more
have you ever seen a creator named Homath?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So Homath, I talk with him quite a bit. He's a nice guy. And he had this great video where he was talking about this specific phenomenon, right? What do you bring to the table? And he's like, women say, I'm the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? They say, I'm the table.
Right.
Well, but here's the counter, right? It makes no sense. If you have a friendship with another man and you do everything on one side of that friendship and they don't do anything, wouldn't you consider that a really toxic, bad friendship? Like a terrible friendship? Would you stay friends with that person?
Of course
right?
not.
Of course not.
But the women
how would it be where you say, well, we're going to have a marital relationship, right?
Right.
But I wouldn't even treat my friends this way,
Right.
you know, like my friends should have higher expectations of me than my own husband has for me. It's like, what?
Well, the irony is where these young women get it twisted, and not even necessarily young-ish, even those in the 30s and now 40s, where they get it twisted is they say, yeah, but when men say, because men have always put up with women, and what I mean is there are things about a woman that we know. It just is. Women are going to cry. Women are going to be emotional. Women are going to complain. Women are going to look to you to be the entertainment director. Women are going to, you have to do a lot for a woman. And even in the modern era, at least we looked at women and said, you know what, but you're still pretty and I get to sleep with you a lot. I'll call it a draw. If I want someone to hang out with or understand me or know what my deal is, I'll go talk to the guys. But now women are even at this point saying, I'm going to sleep with everybody, or I already have slept with everybody, or I'm not going to sleep with you because I don't owe you anything, and I'm not going to take care of myself anymore. And on top of that, just about everything else you expected or wanted from a woman is going away, but you still need to put up with us. And then when men hear not only all of this happens, but she can also leave and take half, that's where so many guys are just like, this is just not for me anymore. Something is broken in the system.
As we wrap this stream up, before I let you shout your channel out and all that good stuff, right? I hope everybody goes and subscribes over. I do want to say a couple things. First thing is that I was listening to Joker's content long before I ever became a content creator, which I had no intention of doing. It was pure happenstance that I got into this arena at all. But I used to, when I would drive between different jobs, if I'd throw the YouTube videos up, I always thought that you have a pretty even keeled analysis. And then, another content creator is a kind of an older one in the, I guess, Manosphere, Sandman, you know who he is?
Oh yeah.
Can I give you my Sandman impression?
Hey guys.
Yeah. Hey everybody, Sandman here. Today we're going to talk about why the woman always can't get out of bed before 8 o'clock. Sandman, but this video comes in part from a viewer, and the viewer said, hey Sandman, can you talk about why it is that women can't get out of bed before 8? That's a great idea, viewer, and thank you very much for sending that in. That guy, I always listen to him. I didn't agree with all that many of his takes, but I just thought he was hilarious, like just objectively hilarious. So I guess kind of a shout out to that guy. I always thought it was pretty funny.
Well, I'm glad that maybe I had a small influence into you actually yelling at the crazies out there. Sandman, I've done some actual interviews and live streams with him. He doesn't talk like that at all on a live stream. It's just whenever he gets into a video, he gets this very unique cadence but he was one of the ones that actually, he's been doing it. Him, a guy named Turd Flinging Monkey that has now escaped to the far corners of the web because he, like you, just yelled at everybody, and he had some very interesting takes, shall we say. He got chased off of YouTube, and Rumble didn't exist at the time. There's so many guys out there that if you want to go deep into the rabbit hole and just be angry about this situation and yell, there's guys for you. And then if you want to come all the way up to the surface level where you're like, well, I like women. I actually appreciate them, and I just want them to be different. And I'm going to, instead of yelling at the world, I'm just going to make fun of them because we're in such a, then you've got other content creators. So there's all
You
of
can
this
do
stuff.
both. You
Yeah,
can do
well,
both.
yeah.
Well, and you shouldn't. And I know you don't mean the characterization just this way, but not really yelling as much as I'm just having an argument, like a
Right.
trying to have a logical argument with people. And oftentimes they actually start yelling, which is hilarious. And I just got to point out, like, this doesn't, what you're saying doesn't make any sense, and it's silly. And how
Right.
can we possibly have this as a tenable position in society? Like, what are you thinking?
But
Um,
but let me break in real quick before you go, because I do have one thing that I you probably heard it since you watched my video on this that I was yelling about it, but I do want to reemphasize it. Anytime they bring up a Mott and Bally or a straw man argument, and they try to bring up all these buzzwords and they throw in Andrew Tate, next time tell them, okay, Andrew Tate is he is a figurehead only. He's not what a lot of guys, a lot of guys have a lot of different issues. Leaving Andrew, because it's almost like, well, what's wrong with Republicans? They say Trump. Okay, don't argue for Kamala, or argue for Kamala, not against Trump. Next time they try this, when they start saying Andrew Tate, massage, okay, take the bad guys out. Now, what about the good men, the good young men, the people that want to fix this? What about them? That's who we want to talk about today.
That's I did hear the commentary. I don't know if you've been on like shows like this where there's narrow time windows. But the only problem that comes up when you do that, when you say, okay, we're not talking about Andrew Tate, he's only a figurehead, or he's this, or it actually shifts the conversation over to now we're having a meta argument about Andrew Tate. Now I have to listen to their response about, no, actually he's in charge of and then we end up in a debate over Tate, and I can't get to any of the damn points I want to get to.
But all it ended up being is everything referenced to Tate anyway.
That's true, but I was able to use my time wisely to dive into the points I wanted to get to as quickly as possible, and just ignored the nonsense.
Sure.
Let's get to the point as quick as possible. So I think while I agree with you, I totally agree with you. I'm just saying that inside of these kind of opportunistic windows where you only have so much time and you got to make it really count, I have to be very choosy about what things I address or don't address, and what things I ignore or don't ignore, because otherwise it'll actually bog the points down. I can't get to the things I want to talk about.
3 words. And this is always a great thing to throw into your repertoire, is blah, blah, blah aside. Okay, Andrew Tate aside, bang, and go right to your point. And then if they keep referencing him, you said, no, I'm not talking about him. Andrew Tate aside, Kamala Harris aside, Democrats aside, whatever. Just throw in those 3 words and then move past it. And what it does is, if they keep referencing that person you said, I'm not talking about that person, it makes them look like idiots. Not that they need help. But
that's true.
Then they keep trying to reference what you've already said, I'm not talking about it. Everything gets exposed, and they just collapse.
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. It's there's never, even if you have the perfect viral clip, it was never actually the perfect conversation.
Right.
And you always have to make sure that you pick and choose what it is that you're saying for the purposes of the constraint of time, to try to make it as effective as possible. Not every decision you make with your words is going to be the perfect one. But all I can do is kind of assess the situation as quickly as possible based on the opponent's.
Damn you, internet.
I have no idea. They don't ever tell me, and I don't care. I'm just like, bring them on. But I have to make the assessments very quickly. And so that's kind of what I'll say there.
No arguments. You're such a master debater.
Master debater.
That,
you can, by the way, for your audience who's watching, and for mine, I only had this up on YouTube. It'll be off of YouTube as soon as I'm out of here. You can only get this exclusively, this interview, then from Joker on his channel. You're not going to be able to watch it over here. So why don't you tell them where they can find that?
Well, I will put it on YouTube, highly edited and redacted, because fuck YouTube. You can go to Odd Man Out on Rumble. And you can go to, just go there. I've got a locals community as well, but that's usually for the people that want to go deep into the weeds. Just go to Odd Man Out on Rumble. All my live streams, all my content goes there unedited, and then it gets chopped and diced up for YouTube. And I hate YouTube, so I'm doing everything I can to dissuade people from going there.
And a little shameless plug on my part for your audience. I definitely want all of your money. And the best way that I feel like I can do that is with what I have is called Debate University. I put out a course on if you enjoy my arguments, debating, things like that. There was such a huge interest in it. It's $200. That's it. It'll always essentially, I'm going to continue to add addendums onto it. If anybody's interested in that, you're welcome to go check that out. You can also find me over on YouTube at The Crucible. You can find me on Twitter at PaleoChristCon. And you can usually find me rumbling with idiots all over the internet if you just search Andrew Wilson. And I really appreciated the conversation, man. It was very good.
Yeah, man. Keep in touch. I'll watch your escapades fighting the great debates and the good fights out there while I silently protest everything in the world. And keep in touch. We'll touch base again in another.
There'll be a method to the madness.
You know, sometimes
well, I
you got to
appreciate it, man.
off.
I enjoyed the convo very much. You have a wonderful day.
All right, brother. Take care. Thanks, man.
Yeah.